Hey everybody, welcome to this week's version of your Sunday Special with Dr. Paige. I'm Dr. Paige Hubert. I am so excited to begin talking to you guys about anxiety and depression today. As we're sitting here talking, I'm just going to share this to a couple groups to make sure that it gets out to everybody who needs it. But if you are experiencing anxiety or depression or even just symptoms of those types of things, I'm so encouraged to be able to get to speak with you today because this is a pretty hard topic for most people. Now, that being said, we are going to end today's message with some happiness and some different ways potentially for you to do some self-treatment. As a caveat, I am not a licensed health professional in the way of psychology or psychiatry. I am a licensed physical therapist with a background in psychology, which was my undergrad. That pretty much only gives me the room to say that I have a background in psychology of the history of psychology, which was pretty much what my undergrad was in. Most of my knowledge is within the realm of the more physical world. However, we do actively talk about anxiety and depression and the different ways that it can affect your actual body. And as we begin talking about that, I am more than happy to help you find whatever treatment options that you need, whether that's finding a medical professional that can help you, or even just finding different self-treatment options that you feel are going to work best for you. And sometimes it is a trial and error. So I just want you guys to know that there is a lot of hope. If you are experiencing anxiety or depression, there are ways that you can help yourself. There are ways to beat this, so don't feel as if you are all alone and on an island. There's so much hope when it comes into this area. So with that being said, I'm going to dive in to anxiety and depression, give you guys a couple of stats. I do have my notes here just so I can make sure that I'm reading everything off correctly for you guys, so forgive me if you see me say a lot or look down. I am going to start off with saying that your brain is an organ. It's a magnificent organ. It controls your personality, it controls all of your actions, your thought processes, and the rest of the organs in your body, but it is still an organ. So the same way if your heart or your lungs were to get sick, you would seek help. And whatever the treatment options there might be, they're not always necessarily medical or pharmaceutical. There are treatment options to help your heart or your lungs or different areas of your body that aren't necessarily related to medication. Most people are more than willing to do whatever it takes to help those organs. So let's keep that in mind when we're talking about the brain, because it is just an organ and sometimes it needs help too. So we're going to start off with anxiety. Anxiety affects about 18% of Americans. That's about 40 million adults in the United States that are suffering from anxiety, and that is a diagnosed anxiety. All of us experience anxious thoughts, anxious type symptoms, depending on the situation that we're in. And now that we're talking about this, I'm going to read off this list to you, and I cannot imagine that there's anybody who is watching this or is going to watch this that hasn't experienced at least one of these, if not all of them, at some point in time in your life, which is completely normal. So if you've ever had palpitations or an accelerated heart rate, I want you to think about if you were walking alone in the forest and a ginormous brown bear comes up right in front of you, it stands up on its hind legs and starts kind of yelling at you. My heart's racing just thinking about it. So those types of symptoms. So if you start sweating, if you get really shaky, if you have a sensation of shortness of breath or a feeling that your chest is being constricted, if you're having chest pain, nausea or stomach pain, a feeling of dizziness or lightheadedness, a feeling of numbness and tingling. I know when I have acute anxiety, my hands tend to feel very numb or very tingly, and that's how it affects me. Now, it might affect you a little bit different. I know there are some people out there that they say they kind of feel numbness in their cheeks or in their neck or potentially even in their toes. So if this is something that you might be feeling, it could be in conjunction with anxiety. Now, as a physical therapist, I ask people a lot of the times, are you feeling numbness or tingling in association with injury? That's a little bit different than what we're talking about for anxiety. So if you have a fear of losing control, that also tends to go along with anxious type symptoms and type thoughts. I know most of us don't like feeling out of control. Most of us want to have control over all situations, and unfortunately that's just not how life goes. So these feelings, the ones that I just listed, can also occur with a panic attack. Now, most of the time your panic attacks are going to be 10 minutes and then they kind of start to recede, and generally you're going to have 4 of the symptoms that we just talked about. Now, technically you can have less, but the rule of thumb is generally about 4. And they can also occur whether you're in a really excited state, and excited meaning you're highly anxious, or if you're just really calm. And that can be one of the reasons why panic attacks can be so scary, because they can occur when there's a very known trigger. So the bear is coming straight at you, or you're having to talk to your boss about, whatever's going on with your job and they've called you in. That can trigger a panic attack. But they can also occur if you're just sitting on the sideline of your child's soccer game. You're completely calm. This game has no consequence within your life whatsoever, but you can still have a panic attack occur. So panic attacks can be quite scary for most people that are experiencing this. So it is important to kind of know some of your triggers and some of what occurs when you are anxious. For me personally, I do get a really high heart rate. I start to talk really fast. Sorry if that's occurring right now. And I get sweaty. And that's just the honest truth about what anxiety looks like for me. Now, I've experienced a panic attack before, and I did get almost like a tunnel vision. I was breathing really, really heavily. I was actually in the middle of a class, completely calm. There wasn't anything wrong with me, but I had to step out and walk out of my class and find a place where I could bring down my anxiety levels. And that's another way that you can start to kind of help control your panic attacks if you can think through them, which isn't always how panic attacks occur for everybody. So those are general signs and symptoms for anxiety. Now we're going to talk about depression, and there are lots of types of depression, but about 16.1 million Americans are affected by a major depressive disorder. Now that is different than a generalized anxiety depressive disorder, but a lot of the times anxiety can turn into depression depending on how long they last. So if you are experiencing, once again, anxiety, make sure that we're getting these things taken care of. I know I didn't say it earlier, but if you're experiencing any anxiety or depressive symptoms that last for more than 14 days, I like to keep it in between a 7 to 14 day period, but if it's over 14 days, we really need to start talking about treatment and different ways that we can start helping you get those feelings back under control. So for depression, another one that I really want to highlight because it's important to me, it's important to a lot of the women that I work with, is postpartum depression. Now, I know I've talked about postpartum depression before. There are studies that are showing that it can actually occur before you give birth, but a lot of the times it happens after you give birth because your hormones are all over the place. You are caring for a new life form that is crying and hungry, and they're quite loud. So if you are experiencing anything like we're about to talk about, you are not alone. The CDC says that 1 out of every 10 women experience postpartum depression. And depending on what state you live in, like physical states, so like I live in Florida or Texas or Alabama, the number can be as high as 1 in 5, and that once again depends on what state you're in. So this is really common. It's just that people have a really hard time talking about it because nobody wants to admit when our brains are having a hard time dealing with hormones and other things of that nature. So without further ado, signs and symptoms of depression: a persistent sad or anxious feeling, or just an empty mood. If you've ever experienced where you're just like, nothing bothers me, nothing makes me happy, nothing makes me sad, something bad happened, that's okay, something good happened, that's okay, that's an empty mood. And that is an actual sign and symptom of depression. You don't always have to be crying and really sad. Some people experience depression as a large amount of anger, and they're mad at everything even when there is no reason for them to be mad. If you have a feeling of hopelessness, a feeling of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness, if you have a decreased sensation or happiness around things that have caused you pleasure before. So if you like to play baseball or you like to play soccer and now those are no longer things that are exciting for you, this can even go along with sex. If those things are no longer pleasurable for you, that might be a sign and symptom that you are experiencing depression, and that's okay. If you have, this is one that's really common and everybody always talks about it, you always see it on the commercials, if you're experiencing depression or fatigue, that can also go hand in hand with depression, because a lot of the times dealing with these emotions, you feel very zapped of energy. If you're having difficulty remembering or making decisions, this can be a sign that your brain is kind of overwhelmed with what it's having to process. If you're experiencing insomnia, so on one hand, you can be super, super fatigued, and then on the other, you can't sleep at all. And then there's those that are sleeping for 12 hours at a time, but never feel any more rested. Another thing is decreased appetite and eating and weight loss can be a sign of depression, but also overeating and gaining weight can be a sign of depression. So these are all very personal things that are going to be very personal for you. So what they look like for you is not always what they're going to look like for me. If you're having thoughts of death or suicide, now this is such a big one, and people are like, well, I've never thought about, killing myself, but I have had thoughts, well, my family would be better without me. What would my family do if I wasn't here? What would it look like? They'd probably be fine if I just stepped away. Those are the beginning thoughts of death and suicide. Whether it's death of your role within the family or physical death, those are all very real symptoms of depression. And those are things that I need you to get immediate help for. I cannot affect those, and whether it's a helpline or talking to your physician, those are very real symptoms and the kind of the beginning of thoughts of death and suicide that are related to depression. They're such a big thing that I cannot stress enough that if you're having these thoughts, we need to get you more help. If you're restless or you have irritability or you're experiencing things like headaches, stomach aches, muscle fatigue, things that have no real reason to be occurring, or when you're treating your stomach ache or your headache, whether that's with ibuprofen or Pepto-Bismol, whatever it might be, and it's not helping, those can all be different signs of depression. Now, I know we just talked about a lot of things, and I know a lot of you are experiencing these types of symptoms on a daily basis, and like I said, if they're lasting more than 7 to 14 days, we need more help. However, these symptoms are quite normal for day-to-day activities. If you got called in by your boss, if you've lost a loved one or a pet, I would expect you to experience some of these symptoms. And it's all very, very normal. And you guys have heard me talk about things that are not normal, and I'm telling you, these things are normal, but they're supposed to go away. After some period of time, you're supposed to be able to move on with your life, to be able to move past these symptoms. If you're not able to move past these symptoms, that's when we need to talk about getting you some more help. Like I said, they need to go away in 2 weeks. If they do not, please reach out to me, reach out to your physician, talk to somebody about what's going on, because that's the first step to getting treatment, is admitting that there is an issue. And now that we've talked about all these super heavy things, I am so sorry that if you're still watching this and it has been really heavy, I know it is, but these are really important things that we're talking about. I am going to give you some self-treatment tips, techniques. They're things that I use, things that I have used in the past, or things that I've researched, and they are super kind of thrown out there in the medical community. The first one I'm going to talk about actually has to do with your nutrition. I am not a nutritionist by any means, so before you start implementing these different type things, I do suggest that you find a good nutritionist or dietitian so that we can get the right stuff on board for you. And there are some mood boosting foods that have been shown within the literature to help you. Things like kiwi, bananas, pineapples, tomatoes, plums, and walnuts are all naturally high in serotonin, which is one of those feel-good hormones within your brain. So if we can get you eating them, maybe we can help boost your brain's activity. Next thing is omega-3 fatty acids are shown in the literature to help with depression. And then things like B6s and B12, which are vitamins, are shown to improve brain function, which once again can help improve your ability to handle some of these anxious thoughts or different situations. I know there's one thing I do want to mention that I don't think I mentioned earlier. With anxiety and depression, there are a change in your hormone levels that your brain is dealing with. If you have been diagnosed with these things and they have been occurring for a while, your brain can only make so much of the hormones and the neurotransmitters that it needs to deal with everyday situations. If your situation has gone on for so long and it requires such a high level of these hormones and your brain can no longer supply that amount, then you're going to start experiencing depression or anxiety type disorders, and that's where some of your medical treatments with pharmaceuticals might come in to help, is to actually re-level out those hormones, get hormones through your mouth, through the pharmaceutical to your brain that it needs to deal with the situation that's calling for such a high amount that your brain can't complete. So if your brain's only making this much and you need this much, we're going to need some help to get you all the way up there, excuse me. Some other types of things that I really encourage are things like meditation. Now, everybody always laughs when I talk about meditation because they just imagine like monks sitting in a corner with their hands like this, chanting Om. Now, that is a great form of meditation, but not always the one that, number one, you're bought into, or two, that you need at the moment. For me, what meditation looks like is I'm sitting quietly, I have my socks and my shoes off, I'm very grounded, and I'm taking nice, deep, measured breaths. And when I say measured breaths, I mean I'm breathing in through my nose for 8 seconds. And when I get to the top, I'm holding for 2, and then I'm releasing my breath out of my mouth for 6 seconds. Now that seems really like regimented, but that's kind of the point, because I want to give your brain something else to focus on, something else to think about, so that we can start bringing your emotions back down. And with anxiety and depression, you're going to need some more oxygen to help your brain function and to think past whatever current emotions that you're feeling. So meditation with measured breathing, whether it's just sitting here, I'm going to calm my mind all the way down and I'm going to do my breathing to help bring my personal anxieties down and help me think a little bit more clearly. The next thing I personally hate. I hate journaling, but everybody always is like, well, have you tried journaling? For me, it makes my emotions almost too real for me to handle. Now, other people, they love writing their emotions down because then they have a physical form of how they're feeling, and then they can go do other activities, whether the journaling helps them or not. They can go for a run, they can do other things, and then they can come back and they can journal about how those activities have actually helped their anxiety or depressive-like symptoms. I personally don't like it, but it is very helpful for a lot of people. The next thing is kind of entertaining, and that is coloring. Have you ever seen a child just really upset in coloring? Absolutely not. I've seen them mad coloring, to be fair. But what I'm talking about is just taking a step back, focusing on staying inside the lines, or maybe you scribble. That's up to you. I'm not going to judge your coloring habits. But it's just something to kind of bring your brain back off of whatever's going on. And coloring's a way to do it. Some people paint. I personally have zero artistic ability, so I like to print things off of the internet so I can color them and then kind of help calm myself back down. The next thing that we're going to talk about is just talking to somebody. And whether that's talking to me, talking to a friend, talking to your sister, talking to a spouse, it doesn't have to be a professional, but somebody needs to know how you're feeling. And also, when you say these things out loud, you're giving yourself a chance to really process those emotions, and then you're also giving somebody else the chance to validate how you're feeling. There's probably a real reason that you feel these emotions, so let's talk about them. Let's figure out what your next step are. Now, if you need more professional help, or if you're like me and you really enjoy talk therapy, there are lots of professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists that are out there and around you that are more than happy and super trained to help you with these situations. The next things are things that are super shown in research to really help, and that's things like exercise. Now, I know exercise is such a dirty word for most people. They're like, I'm not running. I don't need you to run. I need you to lace up your shoes and go for a walk around your block. It can be 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes of a nice walk. I don't need you running. I don't need you huffing and puffing. I just need you to get out of the house and out of your situation so you can clear your brain. Now, I know there's a ton of people that are probably watching this that are like, I get so much clarity from a good 20-mile run. More power to you. I don't run that much or that fast or that far. But if that's what does it for you, great. Let's do what it takes for you personally to help bring down those symptoms. The next thing, and it's such a big thing, you guys, is getting a proper rest cycle and proper rest hygiene. Now, if you're experiencing depression, some people are sleeping for 12 hours and they're never feeling rested. Those are things that we need to talk to your physician about, because rest is so important for your brain to recharge so it can process, because that's what happens in our sleep is our brain processes our day and how it can handle situations better next time or in the future. Sometimes it leaks through in some of your dreams, sometimes it doesn't, but when we're sleeping, the brain is doing so much to heal itself, to right the hormone levels, and to also think through your situation. So sleep is very important as we're talking about mental health. The next thing is, and I absolutely do this on a day-to-day basis, is playing with an animal. I have 2 dogs. One is super fluffy and super soft, and he is my anti-anxiety dog. He is not trained by any means, but for me, I really love petting him, feeling how soft he is. And have you ever been upset when petting a puppy or kitty? And yes, all dogs and cats, no matter what their ages, are puppies and kitties. Now, if it's a horse, if it's a cow, I know several of my friends absolutely love horses. Go for it. Do whatever it takes to help you manage your symptoms. Just for me, it happens to be the 2 dogs that I have at home. The next thing and the last thing I'm going to talk about is getting a massage. Now, a lot of the symptoms that we talked about of depression and anxiety can actually affect your physical body. So if you have a lot of muscle knots, if you're feeling very anxious, very tight, I know when I get anxious, my muscles get really tight and really rigid. A massage might be a really good way for you to start beginning to treat some of your symptoms, and that's by helping your body relax. So that's all I have for you guys today on self-treatment. Before we go, I wanted to make sure that you guys are hearing me. There is so much hope for anxiety and depression, and there's so many ways to be treated, whether that is pharmaceutically, whether that's talking to a professional, or just doing some of the self-treatment things that we've talked about. There are a ton of ways to go to bat with this. You do not have to live with anxiety and depression ruling your lives. So if there's anything you guys need, if there's anything I can help you with, please feel free to comment, shoot me a message, call me, text me, smoke signals, whatever it takes. I'm here for you guys. So that's another episode of the Sunday Special with Dr. Paige. I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye.